It's not so much a question as just an observation, really. And it's that we need to take a little more care, I think, in the way we talk about BME communities and the participants, those who want to take part in learning music. That we talk about the BME community as disadvantaged. We're not all disadvantaged, and I think it's really important that we face that one, because I do fear it can colour the thinking around progression routes, the networks that are available, and also employment opportunities. So please be careful of this assumption that we are all disadvantaged. We're not. And what does concern me particularly is that the ones who are not disadvantaged still are having issues getting through.
Thank you. If any speakers want to respond to that, we'll take a couple of questions and cluster them together.
Hi, I've got one for, my name's Mello Baku. I've got one for, and I dropped my phone. Marshall, I'm sort of thinking from the smaller grassroots perspective. I really like what you were saying, outreach and inreach. I just wanted to hear a little bit more because, for example, sometimes limited time with, can't do the research and development, just have to run into an area and do 3 hours and then run back out. And I'm just wondering how one can apply this inreach thing within that context. Sometimes it doesn't seem like there's anybody in charge, receptive at the end. And whether there was a methodology at all practical to that, or whether it's more about state of mind.
Well, it's not actually, it's quite nice. It enables me to answer the first question at the same time, because I don't think that I know of a methodology, no. It's more an awareness that outreach to me carries a kind of connotation that you need to reach out to somebody to give them something. And I think one of the points you make is, I think we often have there's a kind of arrogance, patronising arrogance about this. And actually, I was working with a group from the States, Urban Bushwomen, who talk a lot about how do you enter community if you're doing work with the community. And part of that is respect for what is already there. So actually, it's as much me as a musician reaching into the community as it is reaching out to somebody who kind of needs something. And so I'm kind of confirm absolutely what you're saying, which is there are too many stereotypes here of, oh, well, those are disadvantaged people. One must work with that. One must reach out to them as if you're giving something. And I think a lot of the time, I'm actually finding that I'm going to communities that have more strength, have more organic power about them than the one I've come from myself. And therefore, there's a kind of respect you need to have for the people and understanding the people you're working for. So the idea here of inreach is that the person with the apparent skill has to actually have a respect for what they're reaching into. That was just the idea behind it. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
I just wanted to add, it's also this sense of institutions being open and accessible, kind of developing those points at which they can be accessed, whether it's be from promotional material through web pages, through generic kind of feel. So it is about kind of two ways, not just going to reach communities, but actually creating an entire kind of feel about the organization when it does look accessible and inclusive and open to all, because we all might be hard to reach depending on what is the kind of the subject of the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, I take the point as well about not everyone is disadvantaged. I suppose that it was just, I was trying to chart out the sort of social situation that we're in, and in particular, the fact that even where you have well-off families, there is some evidence of this, that middle-class families are less able to protect their children in terms of falling down the socioeconomic ladder. And I think part of it has to do with lack of wealth and assets. You know, they don't have as much resilience, but it's actually just money and assets. So I totally take the point, and that's the other reason, you know, we've done this work with Lloyd's and others on looking at what we've called the snowy peaks, where there aren't as many ethnic minorities, even where people are doing well. And the evidence, again, on Chinese graduates is why I sort of highlighted that. I think it's also significant in thinking about how you're going to get representativeness. If you've got, yes, you have a group that's doing well, but we need what they call the sort of talent pipeline. We need a lot more people in it, and the numbers that are doing well are just not enough, I don't think, to make the difference that we need to make in our society. Having said that, I'm very aware that there is sort of growing middle class in all communities, and I think it's important also to try to do what we can to not always talk about a deficit model, that people have no strengths, that people are sort of suffering. I mean, I think people are disadvantaged partly because there's inequality and prejudice, not because of anything wrong with those people. So I think that we have to be, one of the points I'm concerned about is not only to look at what do the individuals who are doing badly need to do to change themselves, rather than what do we need to do to change society where those people don't have those barriers. So I think it's important to try to look at improving people's skills and things like that, but it's just as important to try to break down some of those barriers that I think we have strong evidence still exist, regardless of your income.
Okay, we have a question here. I was just going to ask you if you were scratching your head or you're raising your hand, but you are. Okay, just going to come to this lady.
Yeah, Jacqueline Burnett from Luton. A couple of questions here. The first one to Omar, with regards to the unbiased testing, I would ask you, I think it's really good, and I think with regards to the peak that Janine has said, when we get out of the recession, I think it would be really good if you could lobby to expand it within the public sector, because the BME have developed themselves a lot, and in order to break through, a lot of the parents are not getting top positions within the public sector to then support their children. So if you're doing unbiased testing for the private sector to challenge perceptions, I think it would be help if it was expanded within the public sector. So that's one thing I'm asking you for. With regards to the work that London Philharmonics has done and some of the others, have you touched the faith groups? Because a lot of talent rests within the faith communities. I'm thinking about black majority churches in Britain that has expanded and established themselves, and within the Asian community. The 2 points my colleagues have made in reaching in, sometimes I think the parents don't reach out. And I know, thinking about the development of Maria Anderson from America, in the American models, the faith and the gospel music is quite intertwined, and I don't see that happening here. So,
okay.
If you could answer that point. And please don't forget, BME do live outside of London. Yeah? We're not staying in London. We have moved out, and in the work forward, can you go to the home counties, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. For responses, we've got a couple of questions there.
I can respond first of all by saying that we don't, or we haven't worked with any faith-based BME groups. But I can also say that the LPO is only one of the members of the Association of British Orchestras, of which there are 60. So my colleague orchestras are working in this sector throughout the country, but we only work in London, and specifically in the south. I mean, the LSO is working on projects in the east of London. The Philharmonia, I know, works in projects in the Midlands area, and the Royal Philharmonic in the East Anglia area. So some of us are moving out, but also there are orchestras in Bournemouth, Liverpool, Manchester, and so on, who run similar programs to us.
I wanted to say, from the funding perspective, we are very much aware that some community groups, organizations would not accept gambling money, which is lottery money. So we have made provision, and within our application, one of the last questions is whether people would object to lottery money. And so even though organizations or groups may decide not to take the lottery money, we can take these organizations through exactly the same process, because we have made provisions within our budgets, so we can actually award funding from grants in aid. So if organizations are not in favor of taking gambling money, lottery money, there is money available. So that is not a barrier for accessing grants for the arts and other open access funding from the Arts Council. And we have funded in the past various projects coming from a very wide range of organizations, including faith groups.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take one more series of questions. I think there was one here and a couple over there. Okay. Yes.
My name is Mariana Hay, and I run an organisation called the National Orchestra for All, or NOFA. And I just wanted to make a point about access. I was really interested to hear what Marshall was saying about some of the challenges around access. I just want to add one more. NOFA works with children from across England at the moment, bringing them together from all different communities and cities and rural areas, bringing them together as an orchestra. And every child in our orchestra faces some sort of barrier to cultural inclusion, whether that be learning needs, disability, simply being isolated in their school, they're the only child in their school who plays an instrument, or they don't have the skill level required to access some of the great national orchestras we have in this country at the moment. Well, by the time we have them physically sitting in the orchestra with us, over half of the work around access and challenges around access has already been done. In the world of development economics, there's this concept known as the last mile, and it's about getting the bit of food or the water down the path, down the track, to that village that needs it the most. I would argue that in this country, our biggest challenge is around that first mile. It's about getting the children from their front door actually to where they need to be, either to the venue or to the course that we're running. Our biggest challenge around access to do with that is to do with logistics, around transportation, having parents with very complicated lives who can't necessarily transport their child from A to B and require us to intervene in terms of getting them from A to B. Cost is very expensive, getting children around, moving children around the country is extremely expensive. So by the time we have them actually in the orchestra, well over half of these challenges around access has been covered. I just wanted to make that point because I think it's got relevant to a lot of different organisations trying to work with children at a national level, whether that be sport or drama or art. We're trying to bring children together from across the country. These are some of the biggest challenges, is actually around the physicality of bringing them together.
Okay, thank you very much. And a final question or comment here.
Hi, yeah, quick word from the public sector. I don't know whether anyone's noticed, but there's been, you know, in the big wide world outside of music, there's a kind of a political and cultural shift to the right going on. I think that's fair to say. I want to give you an example of that happening. For my local authority as officers, we were asked to produce a literacy strategy. The first draft of which was rejected outright by our elected members, who said, no, this strategy can only concern itself with the English language. Only the English language, that's it. And that's it. So there's been no act of parliament. These are local politicians acting unilaterally and seemingly kind of driving a tent peg to kind of tether multiculturalism. So I think, Dr. Khan, there's in terms of the wider view of kind of social development and where currents ebb and flow, there's some relevance here with that wider picture. I don't really know how to phrase a question about that, but maybe it's a question for the whole room. And could you edit this out? Because if any of my elected members see me saying that, I'll be toast in the morning. Okay.
Did I say we were streaming live? Okay. All right. I'm not sure if you want to respond to that, and just invite the members of the panel to perhaps just say a last word before.
I did want to raise one thing, which is about the demographic change and picking up. I mean, there were 3.3 million more ethnic minorities in the UK between 2001 and 2011, and only 1 million were in London. So, although London attracts a lot of attention, we are seeing dispersal of the ethnic minority population. It will have increasing effects. I can't say too much about. I mean, we're very disappointed in what we have seen coming out of CLG. Not so much on the arts, but in terms of the integration strategy. We wrote a letter publicly to Eric Pickles, sort of criticizing the substance and any sort of financial support, but also the framing of it. I think there is a really widespread view as well around English language, that if you, people are using as a proxy for how well you speak English, whether or not you speak it as your first language, which is totally crazy. I mean, it basically means that if you speak English as a second language, a whole bunch of government departments are assuming you can't speak fluently, which is utter nonsense. I mean, which anyone who in the room speaks English as a second language should know. So I think there are some real sort of simplifications of understanding our diversity. But the point I was trying to make is whatever the government thinks, both the public sector and the private sector are going to have to go forward, because competitive reasons, efficiency reasons, to say nothing of democratic reasons, you know, they're going to get kicked out as well if they don't respond. I mean, that's the reason why some of them are so interested in how people vote. So I think I'm aware of what you're saying, but I think there are some, I'm hoping that, you know, the talk I presented showed some of the reasons why I think objectively from a sort of what's happening in society, that it's going to be hard to ignore the benefits of diversity.
All right, we're going to take a break there. Just an opportunity for the last...
yeah, just one thing. First of all, I'm glad somebody else has noticed that slide going to the right in the last 25 years or so in the country. No, I just wanted to come back to Mariana's point about logistics and organising in buses and various things like that, and just with a very quick story, because I think there's a very interesting question here about motivation and hunger for what we do. I was teaching in Venezuela last year when one of my students asked if a young cellist could come and sit in on the session. And I said, yeah, that was fine, and afterwards asked a little bit and had a chat with him. And it turned out that this guy had just travelled 8 hours in a bus to wait 2 hours through my session for a 1 hour lesson with the cellist, and then getting back on a bus, 8 hours, would arrive at something like 3 or 4 in the morning back where he came from in Venezuela. And he was unbelievably happy to have done that. And I kind of reflect on a question, which is, how many of us, I include myself in this, how many of us in this country would do something like that? And that brings me back to a question, yes, of course, logistics, money, ordering buses, things like that, they're very important practical things. But my sense is, if the drive is powerful enough, you'll get yourself there to the lesson. And I think there's a very interesting question, which is not going to resolve now. We can have tea now, I think. A very interesting question about that, about tapping into that hunger. Because once you get there, I think you've solved 90% of the question and the problem.
Okay. No? Timothy? No? All right. Well, if you please join me in saying a big thank you to our panel for